Welcome back, or welcome to a bonus episode of the New Levels Coaching Podcast. Remember, we are the coaching podcast that brings the endurance world lots of inspiration and education so you can literally go away and run with that. And we wanted to provide lots of inspiration with this very special episode that I have collabed with my co-host on the RunThrough Trails Podcast, James Tilley, to share with you an interview that we did with John McAvoy. It is a very, very inspiring story. I thought it was one that our audience couldn't miss out on. So what we decided to do was share this on both platforms. So if you've not already heard this episode with John on the RunThrough Trails podcast, then you're in for a real treat. John shares his background in the endurance world, but before that, how he was one of Britain's most wanted criminals and how he was serving time in prison when he discovered a love for endurance sports, in particular rowing on a static rowing machine, before he turned his attention to triathlon and then the ultra trail world. It is a fascinating story, one I know you will love and you will enjoy. As I like to always say, go and grab yourself a brew, whether that's a coffee or tea, sit back, relax and enjoy this episode. I'm sure you'll enjoy it as much as we did. So with that as an introduction, let's head straight over the episode and dive right in.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the RunThrough Trails Podcast. We've got a special episode today, one that I've been looking forward to recording for, probably the best part of a year now since I first met John. So our guest today on the podcast, well, I'll introduce Lewis as always. So we're joined by our regular co-host, Lewis Moses. How are you doing, mate?
I'm good. Good, thanks, James. Yeah, looking forward to this one as well because our paths have crossed in many ways over the last year, and finally all three of us are in a recording room together. So I'm looking forward to, hearing John's story, sharing it with the wider audience, but also giving our spin on how our paths have crossed and how we're all working together.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah, so as we've just alluded to, we're joined by a very special guest today, Nike athlete and founder of the Alpine Run Project, John McAvoy. John, thanks for being here, mate.
Thanks for inviting me on. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Nice. Good. Anytime we get to get in a room and just chat about trail running, I mean, he's already been showing us the view out of his window in Les Arcs, so we're jealous. Lewis has got his little Morzine poster in the background. And we're pretending. But yeah, I mean, let's dive straight into it. I'm sure a lot of our listeners have probably heard about you, John, maybe heard a bit about your story. And I know that anyone who's kind of engaged with the RunThrough Trails side of things may have come across some of the Alpine Run Project guys, whether that's the athletes or the photographers, like we had Nathan at Lulworth Cove at the weekend, or just whatever, like some sort of overlap there with the stories. But I'm sure a lot of people haven't heard and maybe aren't aware of who you are. So do you mind just taking us back to the start and giving us a bit of background on how you got here today?
Yeah. It's been some journey, and I tried to summarise the last sort of 20 years in 5 minutes. But I grew up in South London, a place called Crystal Palace, and I had an amazing childhood. Like, I was loved, I was looked after. I've got no negative memories whatsoever as a kid. Brought up by my mum, my sister. They used to terrorise as a little kid, and my mum's 5 sisters. So all these women bring me up as a young child. And then when I started going to primary school, I used to start getting teased because I didn't have a dad. And I didn't know I didn't have a dad because I didn't know it was normal not to have a dad. But I went to school, people realised that I never had a dad. I got upset. I asked my mum where my dad was. And my mum explained to me before I was born, my dad died next to my mum in bed when he was 38 years old with a massive heart attack. And my mum was 8 months pregnant with me. So when I was born into this world, I didn't have a dad. And that really had a profound impact on me as a young child, because I realised that I wasn't going to live forever. And it did something to me where it made me very, very ambitious as a child, that when I got older, I wanted to achieve something with my life. And I developed this obsession as a kid with history. My mum used to take me to museums, and she used to buy me all these history books, and I'd sit there, and I absolutely loved history. And I can remember as a kid, as I got a little bit older, that I was reading these books about people that had died like hundreds of years before me. And it was like, I was too young to understand what the word was, but the word was like legacy. They'd done something with their lives. And this sort of manifested in me as a kid then to like me wanting to own British Telecom as a kid. That was my dream. I used to watch the adverts on the TV, and everyone had a BT landline. And it was like, when I get older, I want to own British Telecom. I want to be worth billions of pounds. And that was what my dream was as a kid. And like I said, I was so ambitious when I was little, and I wanted to achieve something in my life. And then when I was 8 years old, a man come into my life. He was my mum's ex-husband. My mum married him when she was 16 years old. They both grew up in South London. And my sister was actually his daughter. And I can remember the first interaction I had with this man. He come around our home. And it was very unusual for like males to come into my home as a kid. The only men that used to come around were my uncles. And one day this strange man's come in, and I was just in awe of this man the minute I saw him. And I remember when he left, he patted me on the head and he gave me a £20 note, and I was 8 years old. And I just remember holding this paper money, and I was just in awe of him. And it was the first time someone had ever given me paper money before. And he patted me on the head and he said, "You're a good boy." And he walked out. And then my mum explained to me that she got married to him years before she married my dad, and my sister was actually his daughter. And then what would happen is on the weekends, he would come round and he would take my sister out, and he started taking me out with my sister. And as the weeks and months progressed, he stopped taking my sister out and continued to take me out. And when we would go out, I realised that like the adults he was taking me out and I was associating with as a young boy just wasn't like my mum, my aunties, and all the other people that I'd sort of been brought up round. And they were very very wealthy, very anti-system. And what I didn't realise at that point, they were all involved in organised crime. It was when my granddad passed away when I was 12 years old, and we was clearing out my granddad's flat. My granddad had an envelope from one of his drawers, and when I opened it up, there was all these newspaper clippings. And the man that was taking me out, Billy, was one of the most prolific armed robbers in the United Kingdom. And he was a multi-millionaire when he was 21 years old. And he always used to say that to me as a kid: "Do you think you'll have more money than what I had when I was 21? And that had a really powerful impact on me as a kid, because then I started connecting up the dots of what all these men were doing, where the money was coming from. And then suddenly I saw a path. I saw a way in which to accumulate and acquire wealth. And as I said, when I was little, my barometer of success was how much accumulation of wealth you could make in your life. And then suddenly there was a path that I saw. And again, when you're a young boy, it's very exciting when you're around these men, and they're very alpha male, and they're very wealthy, and they got no respect for the system whatsoever. So then when I was going to school and my teachers were telling me if I didn't get an A in English or maths, I wasn't going to amount to anything in my life. And I thought, you don't know what you're talking about. And then when I was 12 years old as well, there was a film that I saw that was about my uncle, my dad's actual brother. And he committed a robbery called the Brinks-Mac robbery. And he stole £26 million worth of gold bullion. And I remember watching Sean Bean play my uncle in a film as a kid, and then seeing like some of my cousins being played in this film. And it had such a powerful impact on me as a kid, because I was watching this film and I didn't see like the fact that my uncle was in prison for 25 years. I just saw this Hollywood actor sitting on £26 million worth of gold bullion. And then I'm then being exposed to these like criminals that I now understood that's what they did. And I would say that was the pivotal moment that I thought, that's what I'm going to be when I'm older. I carried on going to school, started truing heavily from school, because to me it didn't mean anything. It wasn't going to get me what I wanted in life. And then when I left school at 16 years old, I made the decision that was what I was going to do. I was going to start committing crime. My stepdad thought it would be safe for me being with them than people my own age. So then I didn't have any friends my own age from the age of 16. I was hanging out with men in their 40s and 50s and 60s. And the inevitable ended up happening when I was 18. I got arrested for possession of firearms. I ended up getting 5 years in prison. When I went to prison, when I was 18 at this point, I couldn't be kept with young offenders. I had to be kept with adults because, so just to explain for people on the podcast who won't be aware, when you're under 21 years old, you can't be kept with adult offenders. You have to be kept with young offenders. But in my case, the police believed I was high escape risk because of my uncle tried to break out of prison in a helicopter, and all the people, the organised criminals that I was known to associate with. So they made me category A, which meant I had to go to a maximum security prison in Wood Hill in Milton Keynes. And I was there for a year, got the 5 years, and then I got transferred out of there after I got sentenced because they couldn't justify keeping me at that level of security anymore. And then they moved me to a young offenders institution. And as mad as this is, and every way in which my story's played out ever since, this is where my journey in sport began, because I never did any sport as a kid at all at school. I hated it. I didn't run. I hardly played football. I had no interest in sport whatsoever. And then when I went to this young offenders institution, I ended up spending a year of it in segregation. So I was locked up for basically 365 days completely on my own in isolation, because when I went in there, I was a very angry, hateful young man towards the system. And I remember being in this segregation cell, and I just needed to feel like I was a human, and I needed to feel alive. And I started doing these cell circuits. And at the beginning, I was grossly unfit, and I would do burpees, star jumps, and I could hardly do any at the beginning. And as the weeks and months progressed, I'd do 1,000 of each exercise. So I'd do 1,000 sit-ups, 1,000 press-ups, 1,000 squats, and I would do it in sets of 100. And my body completely changed. And I was reading books every day whilst I was in there. And it was like about me regaining control of my own existence, being locked in this segregation cell. Then they let me out, basically onto the street, because at this point I'd served 2.5 years. I was 100 times worse than the person that was locked up before. Carried on committing crime, went abroad. I lived in Spain. I was living that lifestyle that you would imagine. I was partying, I was taking drugs, I was hanging out with criminals everywhere. All my friends were criminals. I come back to the UK for a week, and I met up with an acquaintance that was one of my stepdad's friends, and he asked me if I wanted to commit a robbery. Beginning, I said no, and then I said yes, because again, the greed overcome me, and I agreed to do it. And what I didn't realise, I just walked into this massive police surveillance operation. The police have been watching him for a month, 100 police officers, and I ended up getting arrested with him. And then this time, the whole game completely changed. I got put in Belmarsh prison in the high security unit because I was a double category A prisoner. They believed that my escape risk was so high because of, again, my links to the criminal underworld. So I was kept on there with 7 prisoners for 2 years, waiting to go on trial. And I ended up getting 2 life sentences when I was 24 years old at Woolwich Crown Court. And the reason I got those, because again, people probably won't understand, is that when the judge sentenced me, he said my links to the criminal underworld was so extensive from such a young age, the likelihood of me being rehabilitated was very remote. And he said, whatever sentence I give you today, you're going to come out of prison a young man. And he went, I believe that the public will always need protecting from you. So he gave me this sentence, and I remember going back to the high security unit in Belmarsh prison. And at the time, Sheikh Abu Hamza was in there with me, and the 21-7 attempted suicide bombers. And I just remember thinking, like, how am I going to get out of this? And I got moved from there to a maximum security prison up in Yorkshire called Full Sutton. Didn't want to change, didn't want to rehabilitate, because to me as a kid, changing and the prison system changing you was weak and you had broken, and the prison system had broken you. So I was very defiant when I was going through this journey, but I realised if I did what I did the first time and spent like a year in segregation and fought back all the time, I was never going to get out of prison, because they can keep me in there for the rest of my life. So I was doing everything they wanted me to do. I was doing the reoffending behaviour courses, and I was ticking all the boxes. And then they dropped me from a double category A prisoner to a category A prisoner to a category B prisoner. And then I got moved to a prison in Nottingham when I was a category B prisoner. And I had access to mobile phones. I'm phoning my friends up outside of prison that lived in the Netherlands and in Spain. And I said, the first opportunity I get to get out of here, make sure everything's ready I'm gone. And again, I didn't want to change. That was my life. It was like me against the system. And I created this like narrative in my head, sitting in there, like fighting the system and pushing back against it and not submitting to it. And then on the 40th of November in 2009, my whole life completely changed. I found out that my best friend, Aaron, died committing a robbery in the Netherlands. And I remember when I found the news out, I was in complete disbelief. And it was like probably the second time as an adult I'd ever cried. And I remember being in my cell and I got upset and I couldn't believe he had died. And then the following night, because it was a group of UK criminals committing the offence in the Netherlands, it was on News at 10. So I remember watching News at 10 in my prison cell in Nottingham and watching the last moments of my friend's life on a CCTV camera. And it profoundly changed me. And it was like, what am I doing in my life? I had this like moment of epiphany. Like at this point, I was 27 years old and I'm rotting, sitting in this cage. And I realised what nonsense it was. Like the people I looked up to as a kid, they were all old men in prison or they were dead. And I thought, what am I doing in my life? And I was completely and utterly lost, because my whole identity was wrapped up in that. Like my ego, everything was of me being that person that was respected within that world of crime. Like I sat in prison and I didn't inform on other criminals, and I sat there and got the sentence, and I was defiant, and I used to push back against the system, and I just sat there and thought, like, there's more to life than this. And I was so lucky. I went down the prison gym, and there was a prisoner called Mickey Still, rowing on the rowing machine every day, and he had extra gym. And I asked him how he got extra gym, and he told me he was rowing 1,000,000 meters for charity. And I asked the prison officers in the gym whether I could do it, and they said, as long as you get sponsorship money, you can come down the gym as much as you want to row this 1,000,000 meters. So I asked, like, people on the wing to sponsor me. I had some family members send me in some sponsorship money, and then I got on this rowing machine, and I did 20 miles. It was the first session I ever done, and it was amazing. Like, I remember so vividly that when I was on that machine and my technique was awful, it completely transcended me out of prison. And when people talk about runner's high, it's the only way I can explain it. I'd never felt this before, but when I went past a certain point on that rowing machine, it elevated me outside of that prison over those walls. And people left me alone. Prisoners didn't talk to me. Prison officers left me alone. And then I did it the next day and the next day and the next day. And I was rowing this 1,000,000 meters over this course of a month. And then I thought, I'm going to keep seeing if I can keep doing this. And I asked if I could do another 1,000,000. And the prison officer said, keep raising money. You can keep doing it. Then raised another batch of money. Then asked to do another 1,000,000. Then I was up to 3. And then one day a prisoner casually said to me, you do realise if you row 5,000,000 meters, that's equivalent to rowing across the Atlantic. And I didn't know that. And I thought, it's quite a cool thing to say I've done. So I asked the prison officer, I said, can I just row this extra 2,000,000 meters? And he said, yeah, like. So I was in the process of doing this. Now, I knew when I was in prison that I had a reputation for being very fit. So, like, we used to do competitions at Christmas. Like, one was called Superstars, which was a circuit. And then they used to do, like, powerlifting competitions. And, like, no one ever got near me in the fitness competitions in prison. And you can imagine, like, guys in there, like, they're very, some of them are very sort of, like, psychopathically driven and stuff. And they don't like lifting. And then when we do the weightlifting competitions, like power to weight, I was always, like, the 3rd strongest in the whole prison. But I never understood or realised what an athlete was. I just knew like I was fit in regards to being in prison. You're in this artificial bubble. And then one day on this rowing machine, when I was rowing this going into the second 1,000,000, or to row the final 2,000,000, sorry, I decided to do like 10,000 meters as hard as I could. And I don't know if you call it destiny or fate, but as I finished the session, a prison officer, Darren Davis, walked behind me and he looked over my shoulder and he was like, that is super fast. And then I knew it was fast for in there because we had like a Concept 2 board on the wall. And I was like 5 minutes quicker than the nearest person. And then he went away, and then a couple of days later, he gave me all these pieces of paper, and they had all the world and British records on an indoor rowing machine. And I remember going back to my cell, and I couldn't, believe they were real because I could already nearly break some of them. And he planted the seed in my head. And I went back the next day, and I said, look, do you think it would be possible if I could try to break some of these records? And he said, let me ask the governor. And the governor was called Gareth Sands. He's a deeply religious man, Christian. And Darren went, I really believe this will change John's life if you give him the opportunity to try to do this. And Darren came back to me and he said, you've got the green light. I just now need to find out how we can officiate this stuff because you're in prison. Because for the records to be acknowledged, you have to do it in a public setting. So you would have to do it outside or you have to do it at an official event. But they basically said, as long as I had 2 independent verifying witnesses, and when it was explained that I was a serving prisoner and prison officers would be the people that would be the verifying witnesses, and I had to be weighed to prove I was a lightweight man, so under 75 kilos, and we had to put a special card in the machine that ripped all the data so they could see that the splits had been done, and I had to be a photograph of me had to be taken of me standing on some weighing scales. They would acknowledge your records. And the first one I attempted to break was the marathon, and it the pain I went through was just excruciating. I'd never boxed before. I didn't know what boxing was. And when I got to I would say it was probably about 36,000 meters on the machine and I was on the red line. I didn't have heart rate monitors. I started to blow up and I didn't know what this felt like. So I had to Darren got prisoners to go down to the officers' mess in the gym and he got sugar sachets and the prisoners were putting sugar sachets in water, and I was just drinking like pure sugar sachet water, and it got me through the record, and I ended up breaking it by 9 minutes. And I remember when I did it, I was on this mat in this prison gym, and Darren Davis, the prison officer, said to me, "You got a gift." And he said, "If you waste that gift, it's the biggest travesty I've ever seen if you come back to prison." And what I noticed when I did that record at that moment was everything I'd ever wanted as a kid. Like, I wanted to be good at something and I wanted to be successful. I realized in that moment, I could get that through sport. And when I say I become obsessed, I used to go down to the prison library. I started reading autobiographies on athletes, on training, on nutrition. I would make protein drinks out of drinking tuna fish, because obviously the diet in there's so bad. I started understanding around taking carbohydrates with when you do endurance sport, because this was a whole new world to me that I didn't know existed. And then within the next 18 months, I ended up setting 3 world records and 8 British records on the Concept 2 rowing machine. And that was really where my dream then become. When I got out of prison, I wanted to become an athlete, and I knew I could then use my body as a vehicle to get me out of that world and give me a life that I've now got today.
Well, firstly, John, I'm going to say it's probably the most incredible backstory we've ever had on the podcast, without fail. It's an amazing story. I've heard it before because I've listened to it on the High Performance podcast, and that's where I first came across your name. And one thing that always stuck with me was that on the High Performance podcast, they said that you've always been high performance because you're a high performing criminal. And you had these high performing qualities that you then transitioned into sport with rowing in prison. And then as you transitioned out, you've continued to do it. That turning point, it's always fascinated me. Like, was there a switch where you saw the people who, I guess, you neglected, you fought against, those prison officers, those prison guards, the system as you described it? Was there a switch there where, because they started to believe in you, you started to see them for what they were really, compared to what you were brought up to perceive them to be?
Yeah, like it's a very good question, and it's something I've reflected on this quite a lot, because I can take myself back to the person I once was. Like, I didn't have any respect for those people whatsoever as a kid. They were always my enemy, and obviously when you're a young person, you can't really appreciate sometimes your environment and what's going on around you. So when you're seeing people getting picked out of your life by the police, but you don't really understand what they've done to sort of get picked out of your life, you're just seeing these police people picking people out of your life as part of the system, and the environment you're in, there's this hatred. And the hatred as well forms from the projection of other people onto you. So I started taking on the stories and listening to the adults around me as a kid. And it was always like, these are our enemy. And then you start taking on those beliefs yourself. So my teachers become my enemy at school. I hated them because it was like an extension of the state. And that's how I saw them. But when I was in prison, I went through that process of sort of rechanging my mindset and the way I perceive people. And like the fact that Darren in particular, that prison officer, how he went above and beyond, and he genuinely wanted me to succeed. Because the world that we currently inhabit and stuff, like with money and sponsorships, Darren used to come in on his days off into a prison and sit next to me whilst I was sitting on a rowing machine and coach me and mentor me. And he was there through that journey, and I developed this incredible bond with him. And it was this awareness that, like, he wanted me to change, and he believed in me, and he loved me and cared for me. And that was a really pivotal moment. And you kind of then have a greater awareness that they aren't the enemy. Like, they're people that go to work. It's a job. Like, they're not there. But in my mindset as a young man, I didn't see it like that.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, it makes perfect sense. It's cool that they were there to support you and that you were able to kind of convert all that, whatever it was, energy, frustration, kind of like the lack of control, the lack of direction into something. But I mean, for me, like, I want to go back to the very start where you were talking about, even as a young kid, like your obsession with kind of history and wanting to learn, and not having a dad and the impact that obviously had on the way you were raised and whatever. But your kind of drive from day one, it seems like you've always been someone who was massively driven to achieve something, right? At first it was make money, success, legacy, whatever that looks like. Now it's about inspiring other people, how you can engage with communities, how you can kind of pass on what you've learned to other people. Like, where do you think that drive comes from? Like that seemed like that was there from the very start.
Yeah, like like I said, a lot of the drive comes from the fact that I realised I wasn't going to live forever. When my mum told me my dad died before I was born, so I had this
Right.
awareness that like my life wasn't just going to be this never-ending story. Like there was going to come an end to it. So then that gave me a sense of urgency, and as I got older, that urgency just sort of more and more increased. And also, like, what's important is yeah, the drive's always been in me, but I would say, like, most of the stuff I've told you up to this point has always been about me. It was always about me being incredibly wealthy. And then when I got out of prison, like I would say, and not the drug part of this, but I had this like sort of Lance Armstrong mindset. Like I used to read all these autobiographies in prison. And it was like, I remember when I joined London Rowing Club, which was a high performance centre for lightweight rowers. And I used to love like being on the, I wasn't as good on the water because obviously I had a massive disadvantage of riding water, but on the ergometer, like I used to love being in that situation of like pushing and making someone else suffer. And then I used to deliberately sit near the heavyweight men and sit in between them. So when they used to look at me and I'm like 20 kilos lighter than I'm on an ergo and I can pull their splits and they're looking, think there's no way we're letting this little guy beat us. But there was this sense of competitiveness. And what really moved the needle for me massively, because I even now, like, I don't really get the impact of my life on other people. It's just the way my life's played out and the way it is. But when I started going into schools and I realised that the impact that my life story had on kids and the way they saw me, that was a big turning point for me in regards of understanding that there's more to life than just about your own personal goals. Like they're important, but for me, like I would say, my legacy was always about being remembered, like achieving something. But actually, what I've come to realize is about the impact you make on other people's lives. Because when I'm dead and I'm gone, all of the people that are impacted, not just children, but in general terms, and how you make people feel, like that's your legacy, right? That's what people hold on to in your heart. It's not a medal or a Concept 2 certificate that I put on my wall. It's about like the impact I've had on other people's lives, and their lives are better because they've interacted with me.
Absolutely. It's so interesting because like a huge part of high performing individuals, whether it's athletes or businessmen or whatever, like I'm into all the same stuff. I'm always reading like athlete biographies and people who are massively successful in business, people who have achieved great things all through history as well. It's super interesting. But there's almost two different facets. You've got people who perform to an extreme degree and have massive success, and a byproduct of that is a generation is inspired. And then, you know, like whatever, Michael Jordan, he wanted to achieve certain things. He wanted to be the best ever to play his sport. He wanted to win X number of championships. And by doing that, he got the whole world excited about basketball and inspired all these people in all these different ways. But then there's other people who go about it with the actual like targeted goal of inspiring people. Like that's the main focus over the kind of achievement. And definitely you, for your first half of your life, or like up until what are we, like late 20s now, when you're doing these world records in prison, it was a lot more about your achievement. Like you've said, like, how can I be the best I can be? How can I do these things that people are going to remember me for? When did it make an actual transition into now where you're at today? Because I know you and you're like a super humble person who's all about helping other people and inspiring kids to get into sport. And this whole Alpine Run Project initiative is all about that. When did it transition into you valuing inspiring and impacting other people's lives more so than your own achievement? Like, when did that happen?
Yeah, I think it's when I started going into the schools and I started talking to young people and I saw the sort of impact I could have on their lives, and then this ends up going a little bit further back to me then sort of processing what Darren actually did for me, like the fact that I was in a situation where I could have had the most amazing gift on the planet, but unless I was given the opportunity to unlock that, I would never be where I am today. And Darren gave me that opportunity. So when I started going into the schools, I was kind of like, I didn't get to that point before when in the impact I could have on their lives. And then I've been very blessed and fortunate that since I've been out, like the way I am, I've been able to cultivate relationships and I've been able to create a life for myself. And I've been so fortunate in regard to the life I've got today, and I've worked towards it. But there's been moments where I've been in the right position at the right time, and it's opened the door for me. And if I can open up the door for other people in life, kids and people in general, I will always do it. Because if I can help give someone an opportunity to unlock their potential and give them an opportunity to see the world differently, interact with people that are going to inspire them, I will always do that.
I think a big thing for me that comes across here, John, and obviously knowing you as well, is you open the doors for people, but you also encourage them to take their own step through that door. You're not somebody who forces them through. You present opportunities to people, and it's up to them to take that opportunity. But there's so many there that you're now giving people. I think one thing that stands out for me, like early on in life, I mean, I'm a big fan of like all these crime movies and series, and I love them for what they are. But I've never. It's never a life that I've wanted to live, because I look at it and I see the dangers associated with it. But what stands out is the difference between the early John, let's say, the teenager John, the pre-25, 26 John, and the one who then managed to get himself into a better position to come out on the other side, is that the one before almost was getting these opportunities from people, but they, I would say, fell into that category where they were still looking after themselves. They wanted maybe you to be involved to give more money, to get more money for them and their life, and for them to have this money. They weren't doing it to look after you, to say, oh, well, you'll have a better life, John, because you'll have more money, because they know the risks associated with it and they know the dangers. But the biggest change is the prison officer, Darren, who I believe is still involved with the project as well to this day. He was doing it for your best interest. He was coming at it from a completely different angle. He was like, I don't care about myself here. I'm coming in, like you say, on my day off, and I do genuinely care about you. I don't give a crap if you, I obviously want to see you achieve these things, but I know this achievement is going to change your life. It's not just being tied to the obsession of an achievement. Like the world record's great, but he knew the process behind that was going to change your life for the better. And I think that makes people very special. Do you see a little bit of yourself, like it, or a little bit of Darren in yourself now because of that?
Yeah. Like, yeah, most definitely. Like, again, going back to when I was younger, like some of the behaviours that I show today, I would have said was weakness. I would never have portrayed weakness, because you're in an environment when you're around a lot of people with psychopathy and a lot of dangerous people as a kid and as a young man as well. So you wouldn't show empathy. You wouldn't necessarily show over kindness, because that could be portrayed as you being quite weak and vulnerable. So as I've got older, and again, like, and Darren has had a massive impact over that, because I saw, again, what he did for me in that environment. And also, like, when Darren's in that environment, must also remember one thing. Darren was a prison officer. So there were prison officers looking at Darren thinking, what are you doing? Because Darren could have been manipulated by me. And this does happen, like prisoners manipulate prison officers. So Darren had to deal with things on his own side within his job that were challenging for him, because he was doing something that not a lot of prison officers, I'm not saying they're not good people, and there's a lot of good people, but they wouldn't have gone to the lengths he went to. And he did it for me, but he's also done it for a tremendous amount of other people as well. Like, that man has changed the lives of so many people. And when you get to meet him on the Alpine Run Project, you can see it firsthand, like how much the kids fall in love with him, because he's such an incredible human being. And he really, really is. And he's now left the prison service, and now he's a school teacher. So now loads of young people are getting this incredible opportunity to get to interact with him on a daily basis.
Amazing. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, we've got to move on to kind of the next chapter now, and how you developed into that. But one last thing, just on the rowing specifically. Like, I don't know a huge amount about rowing, but I know that it's like an incredibly taxing activity, and like world-class elite rowers are super fit, absolute like VO2 max animals. I've seen clips on YouTube of whatever. I guess it's like in rowing clubs, people doing competitions and just fainting, collapsing. It's kind of like a thing, right? It's like a known thing that rowers are super fit. Was that, do you think you were like innately talented as an endurance athlete from day one? You just never accessed it? Or do you think your like, psychopathic mindset, being locked in prison and having this singular outlet, allowed you to just become super fit through hard work? I know everything is a combo of both. Like, but what do you think about that?
I definitely think, like, for instance, like when I race now and things don't go to plan or they hurt, I will always reference being locked in segregation for a year on my own and having very minimal human contact with people. For me, that's perspective. That's bad. Like, that to me is bad. Like, hurting for an hour, 4 or 5 hours running in the mountains or whatever I'm doing, that's not so that's not so bad in relative terms to that. And then that definitely gave me the resilience, I would think, that I would say, in regards of being able to push myself hard and enjoy it. But like for me, it was the fact of like when I did Ironman, for instance, I remember like for years I used to talk to people and people used to fear the marathon. So like you've swum 3.8k, you've ridden a bike for 4.5, 5 hours, and then you get off and then you're running, right? And you obviously you want to run as fast as you can. And I remember like I used to embrace the pain. Like I loved it. For me, it made me feel alive. And then it was like the body and the mind synced into one. And like you can feel everything that's going on in the body. And you just want to push into the pain further. And I know it sounds quite sadistic what I'm saying now, but it made me.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, it lit me up.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
It made me feel alive. And then obviously, again, like I didn't know because I didn't do sport as a kid, but I quite clearly had like an ability. And when it was used on that round machine, you can look at it through numbers, right? Like I could put out the same sort of numbers as an Olympic lightweight man could on an indoor rowing machine over 2,000 meters. And I remember when I joined the rowing club at the beginning, it was a high performance center and they didn't take novice rowers. But when the coach asked me, he used to coach the Australian quad at the world champs. And he was a big coach onto physiology. And he used to say, it's my responsibility as a coach to be able to get that performance and that physiology into a boat to make the boat move fast. But yeah, like I was just so lucky that I ended up falling into something that I absolutely love. And to go back to your point, I will say this to the day that I die, physically, rowers, the pain you go through is a level that I've never experienced. Like I've done Ironman, I've ridden my bike and done crazy races on my bike for hours. But that intense lactate pain that a rower feels over 2,000 meters, I have never even come close to feeling that. Like where you can feel the muscles in your back, your quads, your hamstrings, everything going into lactate acid burning.
It's quite the feeling, and I can only compare it on the track to events like the 400 or 800 where you fill with lactate but it's such a short space of time, but you only have to watch the Olympics to see the pain on those rowers' faces over the years. We've had great success, haven't we, in the boats with GB, and some falling into the lakes and things because they just can't keep themselves up. Yeah, it's not something that I would. I'm not the perfect bill for rowing, but I guess, yeah, let's take it onto the trails as well, John, because we've kind of all met through running, right? And people will be listening to this thinking, well, the Alpine Run Project, what is that? But before we go on to the Alpine Run Project in more detail, let's go with, how trail running? Where did trail running come from? Because rowing, cycling, you mentioned Ironman. Yeah. Why did you get out onto the trails?
Yeah, so basically the sequence of events was rowing on the ergo in prison, then rowing on the water. Then that sort of then migrated to me then doing Ironman because I realised I needed to do a sport where it was all on me because I basically taken up sport. I took up rowing too late. Like physically, I could compete on land, but then on the water, for me to get to the level I would needed to have got to, I just took it up too late. Like they're rowing since they're teenagers. It's kind of like swimming or playing football. So then I had to think, what can I do? And then it kind of, in my mind, I watched Ironman whilst I was in prison on Channel 4. There was a program called Transworld Sport. And I thought, that sport, Ironman, I Googled it. I entered Ironman UK because I couldn't leave the UK because I was banned from leaving the UK because I got a life sentence. So I trained for Ironman UK. And then I went on this journey of like doing Ironman. And year on year, I just got faster and faster and faster. And then in 2014 or 15, I was allowed to leave the UK for the first time and I was able to travel abroad. My probation officer let me go for a week and I went to Annecy and it was the first time I'd ever been to the mountains. And I remember riding up the seminars and I was quite new to cycling at that time. And again, never ridden in the mountains or run in the mountains. And then I was able then to race abroad that year in Frankfurt and I did the European Championships and my performance went up another gear and I stepped on again. And then the following year, I ended up coming to a place called Alpe d'Huez, and I'd never been to the high mountains. And I literally just fell in love. I just remember I'd never been anywhere in my life where I've naturally just had this sense of being at home and at peace. And my life has been so sort of like turbulent. Like I'd never felt at peace wherever I was because I was in prison for 10 years, come out of prison and I had probation. And then when I come to the mountains, I just felt like at peace and it felt somewhere where like, I belonged. And then I come out to do a race and it got cancelled because of COVID. and I still come out anyway because we were still allowed to travel, but all the races were cancelled, and I had accommodation. I was all on my own, and I thought, well, I'm just going to go anyway. So I went, had my accommodation for a month, and I just remember like really pondering life and what I was doing in my life, and I thought, do you know what? I want to move here. I want to make a real big change. Because at that point, I was living in southwest London in Putney, and it was a nice place, but I just didn't feel at peace there. And I just felt, do you know what? I want to practice what I preach. Like I found somewhere I genuinely love it. I was here for a month. I was on my own. I was very reflective, and I decided to move here. And then when I moved here, I was kind of like, again, sports given me so much in my life, and I just wanted to give back, and I wanted to open up this place to kids that would never get the opportunity to come here. So I organised bringing a group of young kids out from London when COVID was like kind of easing off a little bit in 2021. And the group were coming out, and by pure chance, and this is a pure coincidence, I was racing my bike all that summer, and that was me done, right? And my friend met someone at the UTMB and said, oh, my friend John's always been talking about doing the UTMB. So the girl said, who is he? And she said, all right. Anyway, she said, well, if he wants a spot, he can do the MCC. So my friend messaged me and said, if you want to do the MCC, they give you a spot. So I was like, amazing, right? So I had 6 weeks to basically just condition my legs from cycling into trail running. Anyway, went and done the MCC. And I remember running into Chamonix, and the hairs on my neck stood up. I just remember thinking, this is unbelievable. And I finished the race, and I kind of like, it was in my mind then, I was like, do you know what? I can use the sport of trail running to make what I'm doing at the moment, bringing these kids out, more sustainable. So all these dots just connected up, and I was very lucky that at that point, I knew the VP of European marketing at Nike in the Netherlands, and I sent him an email, and I said, can I have a meeting with you? And he was like, yeah. And I went up to Hilversum, where Nike's EHQ is. And when I was waiting outside to have the meeting with him, he come out and he said, do you want a coffee? And I said, yeah. And then by coincidence, you had the head of brand and the head of running outside. He went, do you want to join us on this meeting? So we go into this meeting room. I created this crappy presentation deck that I did myself. And I picked this idea about using the sport of trail running to coach up young kids from inner cities and give them the opportunity to come out to the mountains. And they absolutely loved it, because Nike at that point was strategically moving into trail running. And that's kind of where the project really started to form, the Alpine Run Project. And that was basically how I got into trail running.
Amazing. Yeah, it's so cool. I mean, all roads lead to UTMB. It feels like it's all we talk about on this podcast, but it's obviously, it's just the center of the universe. But yeah, I mean, it's such a cool story, John. So, because I was going to say, when did Nike come into the fold? So obviously you pitched them this idea. They've obviously said, yeah, that's great. That fits with what we're trying to do with the brand. We're trying to expand into the trail running market. So how did you then go from just you with this idea into actually bringing these groups of kids out to the Alps and organizing these trips and camps and getting them into races? And what did that look like?
Yeah, like I said, like my relationship with Nike is very unique because of the way I got brought into the business, and the VP of marketing brought me in. And I developed an incredible relationship with him, but there were also a lot of other people within the business. It wasn't just the corporate business, like it was me with friends within the business, and they believed in it, and they supported me, and they really did help and believe in this project, and they really wanted it to succeed. And for me, and this is very important, the kids that come on my project aren't mannequins, and they're not clothes pegs, and they won't be used. And I would never allow anyone to ever do that to them. And I would want to work with people that believed in the project, believed in the young people, and genuinely want to help. And when I said to Jasper Kane, that is the CEO of Youth Beyond Borders, because I was an ambassador for Football Beyond Borders, like Jasper totally gets that, and me and him are on the same page with this. And he's a youth worker. He's got an incredible network of youth workers from when he ran and owned Football Beyond Borders. And I said to Jasper, look, mate, I know you don't really know anything about running, but do you want to help me manage this project and help me like really make something impactful? And we create this life-changing program, and Nike are going to help support it. And he said, mate, let's do it. So that's how we got to where we got. The first year we had 14 kids on Alpine Run. It was very intense mentoring. And then as the project's grown and developed, and it's now evolved, because before it was always about, when I first set it up was about taking kids from inner cities in the UK out to the mountains. But what we realized as we've done more work around this is that most of these kids don't even go out to the Peak District. They don't go to the Surrey Hills. They don't go to the Lake District. Like, we had kids on year one that lived in Manchester that didn't even know the Peak District existed. They'd never heard of it. So it was like then creating awareness. But it's all well and good creating awareness, but then you've then got to create the opportunity. So you need to then create the vehicle and to take the people from these places and take it to them. And where we're at now is that even now, like, it is very difficult. And I see this quite a lot. Like, people don't understand how difficult it is, how to engage groups of young people that don't do this as a sport. They don't know about it. Like, you have to go to them. You can't just expect them to come to you because they don't know you exist. They don't know what it is. So you've got to create something where it is cool and it looks exciting. And then we take the project now into their schools and into their communities and say, this is what we are. We want to give you the opportunities and the vehicle to come to these events, to come out to the Peak District, the Lake District, and in groups of you will get to go out to the mountains and stuff.
It's incredible. I mean, I've witnessed it firsthand, John, but I guess backtracking as well. I heard about the project through a mutual friend of ours, Monty, who's a former Nike employee, which is where the dots connect, because Monty and Gemma used to work together, my wife Gemma, at Nike some years ago, and we've always remained in touch. And Monty reached out and spoke about you and the project, and both Gemma and I said, oh, that's cool. That would be really good to be involved with one day. And then, lo and behold, eventually we are involved with the project. But I just want to tell a little bit of backstory, because when we were in Chamonix, we came to the event that was at the Folie Douce in the centre of Chamonix. And I remember sat in that room, and I think it's testament to you and the project and the team that you empower these youngsters to, stand on stage. And you weren't there center of attention. Yes, you came onto stage to support them and talk a little bit about the story, but there was young ambassadors stood on that stage presenting and hosting the event and giving them these skills, which was just incredible. And then there was a Q&A with the girls on stage there. And I just remember one of the girls was from the Northeast, and obviously I grew up in the Northeast. And hearing her story, it was just so inspiring. It just really hit home on me, because what you're saying is so true. This is a girl who really had never been to the mountains. Her family had never been into running. She was the first person who was going to do anything like this in her family. Religion-wise as well, she come from, I guess, a demographic that wasn't really accepted in the trail world either. She's breaking down barriers in that respect as well. And I was just so inspired. But the reason it hit home on me as well is because something you just said there, a lot of people where I'm from, they don't even go to the Lake District, which is an hour away from where we live. They're not exposed to these environments, but when they are, it can change their life. It really can. And that, I think that's the power of the project for me, is like, it's not just about running. It's like literally changing people's life. But I think we have a similar mentality, John, and I've never asked you this question, but when someone asked me, like, what does New Levels Coaching stand for? I said, well, we aim to change people's lives through the power of running, because I believe that's what sport does for people. And I'm pretty certain that it's a similar mindset to yourself with this project. Sport can change lives in a really powerful way.
Yeah, without a question. And when you see it firsthand and you see how much it changes someone's life by believing in them and in giving them the tools and the belief that they can achieve amazing things. And like you said, at the event we did in Chamonix with Strava, and the kids were on stage, and at the end, like I can remember one of the co-owners of the Great North Run, one of the guys that set it up, come up to me, and he said, when one of our young boys was on stage speaking, Issa, he thought he was like some young whippersnapper that worked for Nike. And he said, as he was talking, he looked over his shoulder and there was a picture of him running. He was like, wait, is he one of the kids? But that's when you give these young people these skills and you help them and you craft like what they got to do on stage and you empower them, it installs so much belief in them. And now, like Issa, he wants to do more of that. He wants to really use this skill that he's developed now through us. And again, like, he's never going to become a world-class athlete. It isn't about that. Like, the project's not created for that. It's about changing someone's life for the better. And that comes all the way back again to legacy, right? Like, that's what's important in life. It's about the impact you have on other people's lives.
It comes all the way back to you, mate. At the end of the day, like, you're the prime example of this, of someone whose life's been changed through sport. Like you're literally saying at the start, I hated sport, hated school, didn't want to think about it, hated authority, hated being told what to do, wanted the fastest way to make money and to like do something big with my life. And then you found this through this crazy journey, found actually endurance sports amazing. It gives me control. It allows me to push myself. I can challenge myself. I can achieve things that are measurable. Same as like money in a bank account, like numbers on a screen on the rower or on the bike or a position in a race, whatever. It's that exact same sensation. You've found it kind of later in life, and it has literally dictated everything about what you now do, you know, where you live, what you engage with, being in this conversation, what you're thinking about, what you're excited about. Like, you're the perfect example of it. And then being able to then go and kind of provide that opportunity to other kids who don't even know it existed. Like, imagine someone coming up to you when you were 10 and saying, do you want to go to Chamonix and run on the trails? Shut up, what are you talking about? Yeah, it's so cool. And I mean, I can relate to it quite a lot because my story is nothing like yours in that sense, but I also kind of found sport later in life, specifically like endurance sports and running, and it changed my life. And now it's kind of all I care about in my entire world and where I live and what I do for work. And, you know, I care more about my runs every day than most things in life. It's such a huge part of who I am. And I had no idea it existed 10 years ago. So anything that we can do to expose more people to that, especially kids, it's going to have a huge impact. And like you say, regardless of whether or not they take it on and become an elite athlete, of which very few are going to be able to do, just because that's the way life works. They're going to learn so much from it and be exposed to so many opportunities. It's just going to change their entire perception of what's possible, which is incredible.
Yeah, and for me, I think there's a really important message here. Like, sport is often the vehicle. Like John, you spoke about giving people a vehicle. Sport can be the vehicle, but it's what comes off the back of it. Like you say, where you go and visit. People often say to me, "Why did you get into running?" I said, "Well, I wanted to be good at something. Yeah, but why I love running is because it's taken me to some unbelievable places. But I've met some of the best people you could ever meet in life, in sport. Like, I look at my wedding day, the day we got married, and just around the room was full of runners or sports people who we'd met throughout our lives, and they all support each other. And what I see with the Alpine Run Project is not a group of runners. I see a group of young people who are part of a community, and they're surrounded by positive, like-minded people who are on a similar journey to each other, and it has nothing to do with ability. And that's the best thing about it. It's nothing to do with race or where you've been brought up or how much money you've got or how fast you can run. It's just, you know what? We're all on this mission to kind of empower each other and change our lives. And I think that's the most powerful thing about it. And I hope this year, I know I'm going to be at the launch event over I think it's going to be Birmingham. I know the ambassadors are still planning it in April this year. But I really hope people who see it from the outside get to see that and experience in that, because it's such a powerful thing.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, go on, John.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, yeah, like, going back to what you just touched upon there, and it's a conversation that me and Jasper often have, like the CEO of YBB, about, like, you've got a group of kids that the way that the media portrays the world at the moment, you would think that would never get on with each other. And they're all from different races, different religions, different parts of the UK. And it's like what Nelson Mandela said about sports, a universal language. And like you said, they come together and they develop these incredible friendships with each other. And it's been really powerful to watch. Like, I remember on year one, we had one young lad on our project called David, and he was an incredible runner. He's an incredible runner. He lives down in Hastings and runs a 1:08 half marathon. And he was 19 years old when he did it. And then you had Nimra, that was a devout Muslim. And she was going through Ramadan. And when we were on our Wednesday calls, she was like talking about it. And obviously David would never have been exposed to this stuff. And like, there was never any element of like questioning something, like, why would you do? But it was just how they bonded together as friendships. And it was so powerful and beautiful to watch. And when we were in Chamonix, like, again, you're taking these groups of people around, and they're all from different parts of the UK. They've got different lives, different religions, different races, but they're there as Alpine Run. They're there as a group of people supporting each other, and they don't see the life through that lens. And that is so, so beautiful to see in the world that we currently live in sometimes, where it's quite polarized. And for me, that's what sport is. It is a universal language that can bring people together.
Yeah, 100%. So what does 2025 look like? And even into next year, like, how many kids are now involved? Where are you taking them? What have you got going on this summer?
Yeah, so very good question. So we've got the application process open at the moment. Our aspirations are to have between 500 to 1,000 young people attend on the 5th of April. We're doing quite well at the moment with the applications. We did a big push yesterday, and the application shut on the 23rd of March. So any teachers, youth workers, anyone that works for young people that listen to this podcast, please, please, please share the application form around with your young people in your network. And that's going to be like the core group of Alpine Run Project participants.
It's a mad story, isn't it?
Oh, it's absolutely insane. The high performance episode he did was really good.
Yeah.
The high performance podcast. That's when I first really heard about the story. I knew of him through Monty and Gemma, but when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, this is mental.
Yeah.
Because the Brinks Mat's massive. The Brinks Mat goal thing. I don't know if you've seen the TV series about it.
No. When he was saying it, I was thinking, I wonder, have I heard of this? Have I seen this?
Listen to a podcast series on it as well. And yeah, it is bloody family.
You there?
It's mad.
You there?
Did the phone go again?
Yeah, it did. Do you know, weirdly, I was just watching you two talk to each other without me. Was you just talking?
Really?
Yeah.
Mad.
It was really weird.
Good job we weren't flagging.
Yeah. That's shit. This is. Should we pull the plug? Go on, mate. Dive straight back in.
Yeah.
We'll chop it. You were talking about
So the application shut on the 23rd of March, and we're going to have between 500 to 1,000 young people at the kickoff event on the 5th of April, and that's going to be like the core group of Alpine Run Project. So they'll be the ones going to the races, the trail runs. We're in the early. Well, we're at the late stages now of developing a partnership with the National Trust as well to use their sites across the UK. So to get more kids out hiking, because we also appreciate a lot of young people, for them to make that step into becoming trail runners might be a bit too big, but we want to bring as more people into the project as possible to give them an opportunity to go out to nature. And then, across the calendar year, we want to get 5,000 young people out into nature to give them at least one opportunity to come and experience an Alpine Run Project event. And then we just want to keep growing it. And I say it to the team all the time, it's like being a business, and we have to have that mindset where we want to grow, but we want to grow in a sustainable way where we're having a genuine impact and we don't dilute what we're doing, but we just want the project to keep gaining that momentum where we can keep impacting the lives of as many young people as possible, but in a way in which it is sustainable and we don't take away the magic of the project. Because what I don't want it to become is a conveyor belt of on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off, and we're not really making a big impact. And we're playing the numbers game where we just want numbers and not really changing the lives.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's still huge numbers, though, compared to, what do you say, the first trip was? It was a group 14, of 14 to shout. Yeah. I mean, obviously, not every trip is over for UTMB, although I know that you're taking a group out again, aren't you, for YCC?
Yeah, YCC and ETC, and also the Mont Blanc Marathon as well this year.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah, we got groups. And then we'll be at your events. And you've been, and James, I'm not just saying it because you're on the call, but you've been amazing in regards of opening up opportunities. Jamie, who works for you, has been incredible. He's opened up so many opportunities for our young people to engage with your races across the back end of last year and into this year and stuff. So, mate, really thank you so much for that.
Of course. I mean, it's our pleasure. When we had that first conversation, me, you and Jasper, maybe it was this time last year, it might have even been earlier. It just aligns so much with what we're trying to do. It's what Lewis said before, our mission statement as a business is inspiring active nations through running. So it's literally what you're doing. So yeah, any way we can support, that's great. I know we chatted about maybe getting a load of the kids down to some of the Peak District events this summer, and we've just got more, we're growing as well. So there's loads of opportunity. But yeah, no, it's exciting, man. It's so cool. So any last bits and pieces that you want to leave the audience with? Anything else exciting coming up? Or obviously, we're happy to distribute the links for applications for people to sign up. Yeah, I don't know. Anything else that you want to leave us with?
Yeah, basically, anyone that's listening to this, if you want to be involved and you want to volunteer and you want to be one of our volunteers, there's a page. You go on our social media, like the Alpine Run Project, Instagram. There's all other stuff, but probably we wouldn't be on it, which is like TikTok and stuff. But yeah, there's registration forms. And if people just, I don't know, listen to this and feel like we can open up an opportunity here, there, anywhere, and they just want to offer us that opportunity, please do. And just reach out to the team at Alpine Run. And I would massively appreciate it because, again, with a lot of these young people, it's just giving them time as well. And if there's qualified people that are listening to this and they run a business and they go, well, maybe we can get a few of the young people into it, do some work experience. Again, that in itself can be just invaluable.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Well, vice versa. Like if you ever, because there's definitely some crossover opportunity there. If the kids want to get any experience working or being part of putting the events on, whether it's trail races or just regular events, like they can come along and marshal, volunteer, help the core team, get a bit of kind of work experience on that side. We do quite a lot with placement students and things. So obviously more volunteers, the better at the events. Maybe that's something that we could look at as well.
Well, we got 500 kids this year, so yeah.
Oh, mate, I'll take them. Send them to Morzine. Cool, amazing. Well, mate, really appreciate your time. I mean, the story is incredible, and it's like Lewis said, I've heard it before as well, but it's hearing it again. It's just super inspirational, and I think you're a very impressive person, and what you've been able to do through it's a lot of adversity and a lot of very, very challenging situations that most of us probably can't fully relate to, but how you've kind of redirected life and all of this energy, because you're obviously like super high energy, super passionate, that kind of like drive to achieve things has never left, but that it's now being directed into helping kids get out and be active and inspiring people it's just cool, man. Like it's super impressive. So yeah, congrats and best of luck with everything.
Thank you.
And as always, anything we can do to help, we just want to do whatever we can to support it.
Thank you very much, James. I appreciate those kind words, mate.
Awesome. All right, Lewis, anything else?
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't touch on your guys' involvement, did we?
Yeah, I'll just quickly, two things from me. Like Gemma and I are involved now with helping the young coaches, the young coach ambassadors at the Alpine Run Project. And I think it speaks volumes that every week we have a team meeting, New Levels Coaching, and we share our positives from the week. And for the last 3 weeks, either myself or Gemma have used positives from the project, either being there on the weekend or having calls with these young ambassadors and teaching them and learning from them as well. We pick up things from them. It's not just about us giving to them. We learn so much from them, whether that is talking about, fueling through Ramadan and those sort of things. It's been an eye-opening experience and it's been brilliant. So that's the first thing. It's been an absolute pleasure to be involved, and we can't wait to be involved for the rest of the year. And the other thing is just a little bit from John really is, there's a lot of people talk about doing things in their life. And I'll be honest, I get a little bit fed up with people, particularly my friends who, I was going to do this, but I didn't have the time, or, I didn't start it because there's always a better time. Like, think about your legacy. How do you want to be remembered? I think John's a really good example of someone who made a huge change. Like, there's no better example. The life he lived compared to the life he's living now, they're just two contrasting lifestyles, but people don't think they can make these changes, and they give every excuse under the sun. But if you really want to be remembered for the right things and create your own legacy, you can do it. And this is a really good example of how to do it, but you've just got to start. So yeah, thanks for sharing the story, John. It's as always super inspirational, and your legacy will live on through the power of other people, which I think is incredible.
Thank you, Lewis. Again, I appreciate the kind words, mate. Thank you very much.
Amazing.
No, my pleasure.
Right, okay, well, I'm feeling very inspired for my afternoon double now, and the sun's out, so I'll go get the shoes on. Probably run way too fast.
Go on.
Yeah, exactly. But awesome. Anyway, thanks again for your time, lads. Yeah, amazing conversation. And John, certainly won't be the last. I'm sure we'll get you back on. I know we talked about even maybe getting some of the kids on as well, which would be really cool. So we'll work something out. And yeah, best of luck with everything, guys. Thanks again.
Thank you.
And for everyone listening, hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you gotten something out of it and you're feeling amped up and inspired. And if you do want to get involved, we'll share all of John's information as well and everything about the Alpine Run Project and try and get as many people engaged with it as we can.
Thank you.
Other than that, yeah, of course, mate. No problem at all. We'll leave you be. John, go enjoy the mountains, mate. We'll go and make the most of what we got here. And we'll be in touch. Speak to you soon.
Bye.
See you guys.
All
Cheers.
right, take care. See ya.
Bye-bye.